What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Wyatt Russell film, Overlord. Overlord is directed by Julius Avery, stars Jovan Adepo, Wyatt Russell, and John Magaro. This film tells the story of a group of paratroopers in World War II who are sent off to land before everyone else lands on D-Day, and their job is to take out a radio tower in a small village. If they don't take out this radio tower, then the people landing on D-Day will have no air support and they won't be able to take the beach, possibly. So their mission is vital to the continuation and the successful victory of World War II. Upon landing, things obviously go awry and most of their squad doesn't make it, so we only end up having 4 people who make it to this village, and upon arriving there, they realize that there's some weird stuff going on. While there is the radio tower they're supposed to take out, there seems to be weird experiments being taken place in the church that the Nazis have taken over. Now, I have to say, as someone who loves history, which I feel like I mentioned tons of times on this channel, I really enjoy the story of this film. I like the plot a lot. I think it has a very interesting plot in that it touches on a lot of different things to include in this horror action sci-fi film, which is a very weird genre mix, but I think the fact that they were able to take something like World War II, where everyone knows about these horrific acts against humanity that were committed, but take that and turn it into something that fits more into the sci-fi genre, and then take that sci-fi element and turn it into something that can go into the horror genre is really interesting, and I think that the general plot of this film is one of the strengths of it. I really enjoyed the performances in this film. Jovan Adepo, who plays sort of the lead role in the film, he very much so fits that role of this guy who, as he states in the film, just 3 months ago was back home mowing his lawn, and now he's in a village fighting against Nazis, and he doesn't really know what's going on. Wyatt Russell, who has become a really good actor, I think, over the years. He started off as very much so like a very small supporting actor, but I can't wait to see him sort of grow into those lead roles that I think it's very clear he can handle, because he plays sort of the battle-hardened member of their crew here. He's the one that's trying to push them to complete the mission, and he really nailed that. And then John Magaro, who I know the most from The Big Short, but I've seen him in a lot of other things. It's nice to see him sort of step out of the classical drama genre and do something that's a little more offbeat, because I think he actually did really good in this film. He's a really solid comedic relief for the movie. I think Julius Avery did a really good job directing the movie. It also doesn't hurt that he has J.J. Abrams there as an executive producer, and I think that overall, with the action and the suspense and everything in the film, it was all directed really well. Now, my issues with the film revolve around the way the plot was executed in the movie. As I said, I thought the plot was extremely interesting for this film and could make a very good movie. However, I think the choices they decided upon in the way they wanted to portray it weren't the best, because they decided to take this really interesting plot about, you know, Nazi scientists doing crazy things in this church, and these 4 guys having a mission that led them there, but now having to figure out what to do next, made it so you could have a lot of extremely suspenseful, horror-based sequences that were built around the sci-fi element, but then later in the film you could include a lot of that big-budget action stuff. And I think this film just lacked in a lot of those categories. The movie's not very scary, which that doesn't bother me, because being as it's an action horror film, it's not expected to be very scary, so that doesn't bother me at all. The horror element is more there to be like creepy rather than like genuine fear. I think where it hurts the film is that the suspense in it doesn't really feel real, because we know we're watching an action movie. And in an action movie, it's pretty easy to guess what characters are gonna die in scenes, or if they are gonna die or aren't gonna die. And I think because of that, the couple of really suspenseful sequences in the film lose some of that suspense, because we know, watching the movie, that this isn't a movie that's going to take some crazy twist or turn, and we're pretty safe in assuring that X character is going to make it out of X situation because they're that important to the story. And I think that really brought the suspense down, because they weren't able to mishmash the horror element with the action element well enough, where when you're in those scenes it feels more like an action movie than sort of a horror film where it could be unpredictable. And as I say that, I realize that it's a contradiction, because the action in this movie isn't that big either. There's a really big climactic sequence at the end, as there almost always is in any action movie. But disregarding that big climax, there's really only like 2, maybe 3 other action sequences in the whole film, and even then, most of those aren't that long, you know? They're like a minute, maybe 2 minutes long. So I think the lack of action makes it so you lack any suspense, you lack the fear for these characters' lives, and then the fact that even some of that action doesn't even include the sci-fi element or the horror element. It really felt like while all 3 genres got their day in court in the film, they all had their moments of being really cool and awesome. The climax of this film is amazing. But it's the rest of the film where it feels like it's struggling to decide which one it wants to lean towards. Because while the horror isn't working because it's leaning towards an action movie in the beginning, then as it slowly starts to turn to become more of a sci-fi horror film, the action is there, but now it feels toned down. And I think the movie really needed to make the decision on which thing it wanted to be. This could have been an extremely entertaining grindhouse movie that took itself a little less seriously and would have been a great time in theaters. But instead it decided to be sort of a dramatic mix of these 3 genres, and because it was trying to shove so many different things into the story, it just felt really jumbled and never felt like it had one consistent sort of baseline moving throughout it. And then the last thing that I feel I have to mention to everyone is that while this movie is advertised as a big World War II sci-fi, almost zombie-esque movie, that's not what it is. This movie is not some big shoot-'em-up Nazi zombie film. It very much so has a different plot with other elements, and it's pushing in a lot of different directions, as I said, which I think hurts the film, but I think the movie is still enjoyable overall, but I don't want people to go into it thinking it's some big shoot-'em-up movie. I'm gonna give Overlord a C+. I think this movie definitely has a lot of enjoyable elements, specifically the cast, and I think the general plot is really good. I think if they would have just been able to focus in a little bit more and decide what kind of film they wanted to make rather than trying to make a movie that's such a mishmash of genres, this movie could have felt a lot more focused and been a lot better, a lot scarier, or a lot more fun, or a lot more action-packed. It sort of needed to be all 3 to make the story interesting, but I think they needed to choose one of those 3 and focus in on it, whether it was horror or sci-fi or action. It needed to be one of those 3 primarily rather than trying to be a third of each, because it doesn't make for one cohesive film. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Overlord, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and hope to see you guys later.